I never thought much about Thursdays. You don't expect anything dramatic to happen on a Thursday, it's just a bridge between the middle of the week and the weekend, right? That's probably why what I found that night hit so hard. Not because it was shocking in itself, but because it came out of nowhere. It started with a noise. The kind of noise you can't quite place at first, but it sets something off in your head. A muffled sound, like something heavy being moved, or the dull thud of a door closing quietly, too quietly. It was 11:30 p.m., and Sarah had been asleep for hours, or at least I thought she had. But that sound, it came from downstairs, and I wasn't the only one who heard it. Our dog, Max, had his ears up, alert. He was staring at the bedroom door, his body stiff, hackles raised. It was strange because Max wasn't a guard dog by any means. He was more of the lazy, sleep-all-day type, but that noise had him on edge. And in that moment, so was I. At first, I thought maybe I was just being paranoid. We live in a quiet neighborhood, and nothing really happens around here. But something gnawed at me, a feeling in my gut that told me this wasn't just the house settling. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Sarah, who was turned away from me, deep in sleep. Or at least, that's what it looked like. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept under the bed, a habit from years ago when I had a brief, irrational fear of home invasions. I tiptoed to the door and listened for any more sounds. Silence. But Max was still staring, still tense. I slowly opened the door, the bat in one hand, my pulse thrumming in my ears. I crept down the stairs, each step creaking louder than I wanted it to. When I reached the bottom, I looked around. Everything was in its place. The living room, untouched. The kitchen, exactly as we left it. That's when I noticed the back door. It was unlocked. It hadn't been unlocked earlier. I know that for a fact because I always check the doors before heading to bed. I walked over, bat still in hand, and pulled it open, just a crack. The night air hit me, cold and damp, and I stepped outside, scanning the yard. Nothing seemed out of place. But just as I was about to head back in, I noticed something on the side gate. It wasn't obvious, just a tiny flash of something metallic in the dark. A bike lock. Not mine. A bike lock on my gate. I stood there for a second, trying to make sense of it. Maybe someone was messing around, a prank? But this wasn't a joke. The lock was new, shiny, and this was the part that really got me, it wasn't locked. It was just hanging there, like someone had planned to come back. To get in later. The air around me suddenly felt heavier, and a thought started to form in my mind, one I wasn't ready to accept yet. But the more I stared at that lock, the more it made sense. Not the way I wanted it to, but in a way that made me feel sick to my stomach. I went back inside, closing the door behind me. Max had followed me downstairs, and he was still on edge, pacing, like he knew something I didn't. And that's when it hit me, the noise, the door, the lock. This wasn't about me at all. It was about Sarah. And whoever had just left. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the door for longer than I'd care to admit. My hand gripped the baseball bat so tightly it started to hurt, but I couldn't let go. My mind was racing, but I couldn't pin down a single thought. The lock. The noise. Sarah. Then, without really thinking, I headed upstairs. My legs felt heavier with every step, like I was walking into something I wasn't prepared for. When I got to our bedroom, I pushed the door open a little too fast. It banged against the wall, and Sarah jerked awake. She blinked at me, confused, squinting in the dim light from the hallway. "Hey, what are you doing?" she asked, her voice groggy, like I'd just interrupted some dream. I didn't answer right away. I just stood there, watching her. She looked so innocent lying there, wrapped in the covers. It was like the woman in front of me was a stranger, someone playing a role. That's when I saw it. At the foot of the bed, barely peeking out from under the corner of the blanket, shoes. Not hers. Men's shoes. My chest tightened. I felt my pulse in my throat, the blood rushing to my head so fast it almost made me dizzy. I bent down and yanked the blanket back. There they were. Sneakers. Dirty, worn, a size too big to be mine. Whose are these? I asked, my voice coming out flat, dead, like I wasn't even sure I was the one speaking. Sarah shot up in bed, her face going pale the second she saw the shoes. She didn't answer right away, just stared at me like a deer caught in headlights. I could see her trying to work out what to say, how to spin it. But I wasn't in the mood for games. Whose are these? I repeated, my jaw so tight the words barely made it out. She didn't look at me. She didn't even try to pretend. Instead, she swung her legs over the side of the bed, her back to me now, her hands gripping the edge of the mattress like she was holding on for dear life. It's not what you think, she finally said, her voice shaky. I couldn't help but laugh. It wasn't a funny laugh. It was the kind of laugh that comes out when you've gone past anger into something darker. Really? Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like what I think. I could hear the panic creeping into her voice now. I was going to tell you. I didn't want to hurt you. Too late for that. That's when the closet door moved. It was just a small shift, a quiet creak that would have been nothing in any other situation. But this wasn't any other situation. I walked over to the closet, yanked the door open, and there he was. Some guy. I'd never seen him before in my life, but there he was, standing half-dressed in my closet like it was the most normal thing in the world. He had his shirt in his hands, his face a mix of fear and shame, like a kid caught stealing. He didn't say anything, just stood there, waiting for me to do something. I wanted to swing the bat. God knows I did. But I didn't. I just stood there, the rage in me building like a pressure cooker. I dropped the bat to the floor, the clatter of it louder than I expected. The guy flinched. Get out, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't need to be told twice. He grabbed his shoes, those goddamn shoes, and bolted down the stairs. I heard the door slam behind him. For a second, the room was dead quiet. Just me and Sarah. I could hear her breathing, fast and shallow. She hadn't moved, still sitting there with her back to me. I wasn't sure what to do. Part of me wanted to scream, to yell at her, to demand an explanation. The other part wanted to leave, to just walk out and never come back. But I didn't do either. I just stood there, staring at her, waiting for her to speak. Finally, she turned around, her eyes red and wet. I'm sorry, she said, her voice barely holding together. I didn't mean for it to happen. It's just. I didn't care about the excuses. Not right now. I didn't want to hear her explain it away. I didn't want to understand. There was nothing to understand. I walked out of the room without another word, leaving her sitting there, crying, as if that would somehow make it better. But nothing was going to make this better. I didn't leave the house. I wanted to, but something in me wouldn't let go. I paced downstairs for a while, trying to get my head straight, but every time I thought I had a grip on it, I saw those damn shoes again. I kept hearing that closet door creak open, over and over in my head, like it was stuck on a loop. I needed answers. I needed to hear her say it. No more hiding, no more excuses. I needed to hear the truth, even if it made me sick. I went back upstairs. She was still sitting on the bed, like she hadn't moved an inch. Her hands were trembling in her lap, her hair a mess, and her eyes swollen from crying. But I didn't care. I didn't feel any sympathy for her. Talk, I said. Start talking. She looked up at me, her lip quivering. I didn't want you to find out like this. How did you want me to find out? I shot back, stepping closer. Were you planning to introduce me to him over breakfast? Maybe let him stay for coffee? Her face crumpled, and for a second, I thought she might just break down completely. But she didn't. Instead, she wiped her eyes and took a deep breath, like she was trying to pull herself together. I didn't mean for it to happen, okay, she stammered. It was just, it got out of hand. Out of hand? Are you hearing yourself right now? I could feel my pulse hammering in my temples. You had a guy hiding in our closet, Sarah. This isn't something that just gets out of hand. She flinched at that, like my words were hitting her harder than they should have. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. How long has this been going on? I asked, my voice ice cold. She hesitated, and I could see her weighing whether to lie or not. A few months. A few months, I repeated, the words hanging heavy in the air. Jesus Christ. She tried to explain herself, her voice pleading now. It wasn't serious. It wasn't, he didn't mean anything. I cut her off. Don't you dare downplay this. Do you think it makes a difference to me if it was serious or not? You've been sneaking around with someone behind my back for months, and you expect me to feel better because it wasn't serious? She was crying again, but I didn't stop. I couldn't let her tears derail what I needed to say. Why him? Why anyone? What was wrong with us? I could feel the anger starting to crack, something deeper slipping through. Hurt, confusion. But I didn't want to show her that. Not yet. I don't know, she whispered, her face in her hands now. I don't know. I was unhappy. Unhappy? I laughed again, that same bitter laugh from before. You could have talked to me. You could have told me you were unhappy. But instead, you went and did this? You thought this was the answer? I didn't mean for it to go this far, she sobbed. I didn't know what I was doing. Obviously. I felt like throwing something, breaking something, just to match the chaos I felt inside. But all I could do was stand there and let it pour out. Did you ever stop to think about me? I asked, my voice quieter now. Or was I just some idiot too blind to see what was going on right in front of him? She didn't respond. She just sat there, shaking, unable to look at me. The silence was suffocating, and I was sick of hearing her excuses. I was sick of standing there in that room where everything felt like a lie. I turned and headed for the door. Where are you going? She asked, her voice small, broken. I stopped, my hand on the doorframe, but I didn't turn around. I don't know. But I can't stay here. As I walked out, I could hear her sobbing behind me, but it didn't matter. None of it mattered anymore. The thing about revenge is that it doesn't come to you in some grand epiphany. It sneaks up on you. A cold, clear thought creeping into the back of your mind while the rest of you is still stuck in the mess of emotions. I wasn't sitting there plotting anything, but after I left the house that night, it all fell into place without me even trying. I didn't go far. I just drove around for hours, letting the night swallow me. I wasn't sure where I was going, but as I replayed everything in my head, the shoes, the closet, her excuses, something inside me shifted. The hurt was still there, burning deep, but it was starting to get swallowed by something sharper. Anger. I couldn't let her walk away from this without consequences. By the time I pulled back into the driveway, it was almost morning. The house was dark, quiet. She was probably still upstairs, crying herself to sleep or just lying there in a bed that still smelled like someone else. I sat in the car for a while, staring at the front door, trying to figure out my next move. And that's when I realized what I had to do. I wasn't going to scream, I wasn't going to throw things, and I wasn't going to lay a hand on her. That was too easy, too predictable. No, I needed her to feel what I was feeling, to understand just how deep this cut. And I knew exactly how to do it. I walked inside, quiet as a shadow, and went straight to our bedroom. She was still there, curled up on her side of the bed, her face buried in the pillow. I didn't care if she was asleep or pretending. I wasn't there for her right now. Instead, I went to the closet. I started pulling out clothes, her dresses, her shirts, everything she had that took up space in our life. I grabbed the hangers, yanked them off the bar, and threw everything into a pile on the floor. She must have heard me, because she stirred and sat up, confused and blinking in the darkness. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice still thick with sleep. I didn't answer. I just kept pulling everything down, clearing out her side of the closet like I was erasing her from it. Stop. She got out of bed, rushing over to me, trying to grab my arm. What the hell are you doing? I shook her off. You want it out, right? I'm just speeding up the process. She looked at the pile of clothes on the floor, panic flashing across her face. You're being crazy. You don't have to do this. I didn't stop. I pulled down her shoes, the heels she wore when we went out, the sneakers she kept for jogging but never used. Into the pile they went. Her makeup, her jewelry, everything I could find. I grabbed the suitcase from the top shelf of the closet and tossed it next to the pile. Pack, I said. She stared at me like I was a stranger, her eyes wide. You're kicking me out? No. I'm giving you what you wanted, I said, cold and even. You don't get to sit here and cry like you're the victim. You don't get to stay here, pretending like nothing happened. You made your choice. Her face crumpled again, but I wasn't buying it. Not anymore. This is our house. You can't just throw me out, she said, her voice shaking. Our house? I repeated, laughing without any humor. I paid for this house. I've been paying for everything while you've been sneaking around behind my back. You don't get to pull that card now. She opened her mouth to argue, but I didn't care. I wasn't listening. I grabbed the suitcase, unzipped it, and started shoving her clothes into it. Rough, fast, like I was trying to get the poison out of my system. She tried to stop me, pulling at the clothes, grabbing at my arms, but I wasn't stopping. You want to be with him? Go. Be with him. But you're not staying here. Please, just stop for a second. No, I slammed the suitcase shut, zipping it up in one swift motion. You wanted your secret life. Well, here's your chance. Pack up and leave. Her face was pale, her hands trembling as she stood there, unsure of what to do next. Where am I supposed to go? I shrugged. I don't care. She looked at me, tears in her eyes, but I wasn't moved. Not this time. I threw the suitcase at her feet. I'll give you an hour. Then you're gone. I left her standing there, frozen, while I walked out of the room. The hour passed slowly. I sat downstairs in the living room, staring at nothing, waiting for her to make a move. The house felt different now, like it wasn't mine anymore. I could hear her upstairs, shuffling around, probably packing what little dignity she had left into that suitcase. The sound of drawers opening and closing, footsteps moving between rooms. Every second dragged on, but I was in no hurry. I wanted her to feel it, the weight of leaving, of knowing she had no place here anymore. Eventually, she came down the stairs. I didn't look at her right away. I could feel her standing at the bottom, waiting for me to acknowledge her. But I wasn't going to make this easy. I packed what I could, she said quietly, almost like she was afraid of breaking the silence. I nodded but didn't say anything. The suitcase was next to her, but she wasn't holding it. I knew why she didn't want this to be real. She was hoping I'd change my mind, that maybe this was just me venting and that in the end, I'd back down. She stood there for a few moments, waiting for me to say something. When I didn't, she stepped forward and sat down on the couch across from me. I kept my eyes forward, feeling the tension in the air growing heavier with each passing second. Can we talk? She asked. I finally looked at her. Her eyes were red, her face blotchy from crying, but it didn't move me the way it used to. I wasn't angry in that moment, I was just tired. So, I leaned back in the chair and crossed my arms. Talk, I said, my voice flat. She hesitated, like she didn't know where to start. I watched her struggle, trying to find the right words, but nothing was going to fix this. I was beyond repair. I don't know how we got here, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. I never wanted this to happen. I didn't plan for any of this. That's the problem, I replied. You didn't plan. You didn't think. I was unhappy, she said, repeating herself, like it was supposed to explain everything. And you thought screwing around with some guy would fix that? She shook her head. No. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Enlighten me. I leaned forward now, staring at her, waiting for something real. Because from where I'm sitting, it's pretty damn simple. She wiped at her face, taking a deep breath. I felt lost. I didn't know how to talk to you about it. It wasn't about him. It wasn't about anyone. I was just trying to find something, anything, to feel better. And you never thought to talk to me? I asked. I'm your husband, Sarah. You didn't think I deserved to know you were falling apart? Her eyes dropped to the floor, guilt written all over her face. I was afraid, she whispered. Afraid of what? She looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw something different in her eyes. Not just fear or shame, but something else, regret. I was afraid you wouldn't understand. That you'd think I was being ungrateful. We have a good life, right? You take care of me, and we have this house and... I just felt like I couldn't say I wasn't happy. Like I didn't have the right. So you decided to lie instead. She didn't respond. She just sat there, looking defeated. I sighed, the weight of everything crashing down on me all at once. The anger, the betrayal, the sadness, it all felt like too much. I didn't know how to move forward from this, didn't know what to do next. I loved you, I said quietly, the words hanging in the air. And you threw it all away for what? A quick fix? Some guy who didn't mean anything? I didn't mean to hurt you, she whispered again, her voice cracking. But you did, I said, my voice sharp now. You did, and you can't take it back. You can't undo it. Her shoulders slumped, and I could see the realization sinking in. This was it. There was no coming back from this. I know, she said, her voice barely audible. We sat there in silence for a long time. I could feel the finality of it, the way everything was about to end. I didn't want to drag this out anymore, didn't want to keep going in circles. It was time to face the truth, even if it hurt. I can't do this anymore, I finally said, my voice steady. I can't stay married to someone who betrayed me like this. She nodded, tears slipping down her face. I know. I'll talk to a lawyer, I continued, feeling the words settle in the pit of my stomach. We'll figure out the details. But you can't stay here. Her eyes searched mine, looking for something, hope, forgiveness, maybe even a chance. But there was nothing left. I had nothing left to give. Where will I go? She asked, her voice small. I don't care, I said, standing up. That's not my problem anymore. I walked toward the door, not wanting to look at her any longer. I could hear her crying softly behind me, but I didn't turn back. I couldn't. This was over. I was done. I'm sorry, she said one last time, her voice breaking. I paused, my hand on the doorknob, but I didn't say anything. I just stood there for a moment, letting the silence between us settle in. Then, without looking back, I opened the door and walked out. I walked out of the house and didn't look back. It felt like stepping off a ledge, into something I couldn't see, but at least it wasn't the place that had become a prison of lies. My whole life had just crumbled in front of me, and for the first time, I didn't have a plan. There was no going back. No fixing it. What do you do when the person you built your entire life around turns out to be a stranger? I didn't know. I got in the car, started the engine, and just sat there. The anger was gone now, replaced by this strange emptiness. It's not the kind of feeling you can really describe, because it's not like you're sad or hurt anymore. You're just nothing. A hollow space where all the noise used to be. I thought back to the guy in the closet. Some nobody who walked into my life and wrecked it without even trying. I wondered if he knew what he had done, if he even cared. Probably not. Guys like that, they don't care about the fallout. They just move on to the next person, the next lie. He'd probably never think of me again, but I'd have to live with this forever. But it wasn't just about him. It was about Sarah. About the choices she made, and the fact that I never saw it coming. How does someone you trust with everything suddenly turn into someone capable of breaking you like that? I couldn't wrap my head around it, and I didn't think I ever would. I drove aimlessly for a while, no destination in mind. My thoughts kept circling back to the same questions, the same scenes. Over and over. I thought about how Sarah said she was unhappy, how she couldn't talk to me. It didn't make sense. We weren't perfect, but who is? I thought we were good enough. But apparently, that wasn't the case. Maybe I had missed something. Maybe I wasn't paying attention to her the way I should have. Or maybe it was never about me at all. Maybe she was just broken in a way that I couldn't fix. The truth is, I could spend the rest of my life trying to figure it out, but it wouldn't change anything. The damage was done. I pulled into a gas station at some point. Not because I needed gas, but because I needed to stop. To breathe. I got out, leaned against the car, and just stared at the road stretching out in front of me. This was it, wasn't it? The end of everything I thought I knew. A car pulled into the pump next to me. A couple got out, laughing, talking about something that didn't matter. I watched them for a second, wondering if they had any idea how fragile it all was. How easy it is for everything to fall apart when you're not looking. Probably not. People never do. I went inside, grabbed a bottle of water, and stood in line behind a guy buying lottery tickets. He was talking to the cashier about his odds, about how this time might be the one that changes his life. I felt a weird kind of envy, like I wished I could still believe in something that's simple. But my world wasn't simple anymore. I paid for the water and walked back to the car, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on me. I knew I had to make a choice now. I could let this destroy me, let it define the rest of my life, or I could move on. Start over. I didn't know how to do that yet, but standing still wasn't an option. When I got back in the car, I sat there for a long time, just staring at the steering wheel. My phone buzzed. A message from Sarah. I didn't open it. I didn't want to hear any more apologies or explanations. There was nothing she could say that would change what happened. I blocked her number. The next step was leaving her behind for good. A lawyer, papers, splitting everything we built together. The house, the memories, everything that once meant something. It would all have to be divided up, parceled out like it was just stuff. And maybe it was now. Just stuff. Things we owned but didn't matter anymore. I didn't know where I'd go, what I'd do next. But I knew this much, I wasn't going to let her ruin what was left of me. She had taken enough. I'd rebuild, somehow. As I pulled back onto the road, I felt something shift inside me. Not peace, not relief, but maybe the start of acceptance. This wasn't the life I planned, but it was the one I had now. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I was in control again. Whatever came next, I was ready to face it. Alone.